I was reading up on Zoroaster, the Persian prophet who I have derived my YouTube name from, and I came across a Christian site that was making a poor attempt at distancing itself from Zoroastrianism. The only way it seemed to be able to do this was to claim that Zoroastrianism could not date to any earlier time than about 100 CE. The oldest known surviving Zoroastrian texts date to around 1300 CE, but the earliest known mention of Zoroaster in Greek texts was around 450 BCE, clearly predating Jesus. According to the Greeks, Zoroastrianism was the state religion of the Achaemenid dynasty of Persia. The Achaemenid Empire, commonly known as the Persian Empire, existed from around 550 to 330 BCE and was arguably one of the most powerful, most advanced civilizations on the planet at the time. Previous great civilizations, such as the Egyptians, Babylonians, Assyrians, and other great Mesopotamian civilizations, came under the control of Persia. The latest acceptable date for the birth of Zoroastrianism is around 550 BCE, but it's not that simple. At this point, it's probably a good idea to point out a few things. Zoroaster is a Greek bastardization of the term Zarathustra. The first time it appears in Greek writings was around 450 BCE, which was about the same time that the Greco-Persian Wars ended. For about 49 years, the Persians had attempted to subdue the Greek city-states. With only limited victories, the Greek campaigns were a series of tremendous defeats for the Persian Empire. But even this date, 450 BCE, is a bit too late for Zoroastrianism. The key to determining the date of the Zoroastrian poetical texts, known as Gathas, is the language. The Zoroastrian Gathas were written in a language that was in all likelihood dead by the time the Persian Empire came to power. It was written in Avestan, an old Eastern Iranian language that belongs to the Indo-Iranian family of languages. In fact, the only reason we know this language existed is because of the Zoroastrian texts. As far as is known, the Zoroastrian Gathas were the only text written in Avestan. Whether or not the writings were physically created at a later date is somewhat irrelevant. Even if the stories had been passed down orally, Zoroastrian priests were speaking a dead language, a language which seems to be very similar to Indo-Iranian languages which ceased to exist around 1000 BCE. And finally, Zoroastrianism is very much an offshoot of the Indo-Iranian religions, much in the same way that Buddhism spun off from Hinduism. It goes a little like this. A group of people in Central Asia believe in a group of gods, so many gods that they couldn't possibly be counted in one sitting. This animistic, polytheistic religion begins to consolidate itself and begins to write about itself. This is the beginning of Hinduism. But not everyone is cool with having over 3 million deities, so along comes Zarathustra. Zarathustra doesn't deny all gods, but simply says there is one, all-good, all-powerful God named Ahura Mazda, and that Ahura Mazda created everything, and is in a power struggle with evil in the form of Angrimanyu, whom he also created. This is the beginning of Zoroastrianism. A bit later, Siddhartha comes along, says the gods aren't important, and Buddhism is born out of the same family of religions. So, why is this guy talking about Zoroaster? First, a quick summary of Zoroastrianism. There is one God, all-powerful and all-good. He is in a fight with an evil god. This fight will eventually end in apocalypse. Everyone is judged, evil people go to hell, but eventually, after they are purged of their sins by fire, everyone gets into heaven. Also, the first known mention of Zoroastrianism and some of its practices is from around 450 BCE by the Greeks. Now, let us look at the Bible. It is unclear when exactly the stories of the Bible were written, and I won't begin trying to figure that out, but beyond time frame, when put in the context of Zoroastrianism and the Zoroastrian state of Persia, the Bible takes an interesting turn. There are 4 very interesting aspects to the book of Esther. 1. Unlike many Old Testament books, Esther is purely about nationality and not about religion. 2. The entire story takes place in Susa, one of the three capitals of the Persian Empire. 3. God is not mentioned once in the book of Esther. And 4. The Jews seem to have a very high opinion of the Persian Empire and Persian kings, in this case, apparently Xerxes. In these two books, the writers speak of the reconstruction of Jerusalem and its temple. Both have been destroyed by the Babylonians. What is interesting about these two books is the seeming complicity that the Persian Empire has in reconstructing the Jewish homeland. At the same time, particularly in Ezra, the other nations appear to be left out of this reconstruction, and are jealous of the attention the Jews seem to be getting. These two books mention more Persian emperors, including Cyrus, Xerxes, Darius, and Artaxerxes, and it speaks of all these kings in a positive light. Now in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, that the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, so that he made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom, and also put it in writing, saying, Thus says Cyrus, king of Persia, All the kingdoms of the earth the Lord God of heaven has given me, and he has commanded me to build him a house at Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Who is among you of all his people? May the Lord, his God, be with him, and let him go up. Clearly, the Jewish writers thought highly of Cyrus, so highly that the writers claimed that not only was he inspired by God, but that he spoke openly and affirmatively about the Jewish God. In Isaiah chapter 44, verses 24 through 28, God is supposedly speaking about himself. In verse 28, he speaks of himself in this manner, Who says of Cyrus, He is my shepherd, and he shall perform all my pleasure, saying to Jerusalem, You shall be built, and to the temple, Your foundation shall be laid. In at least 4 books of the Old Testament, the Zoroastrian kings of Persia are tools of the Jewish Yahweh. In at least 2 of the books, the Persian kings are fully aware that they are emissaries of the Jewish God. Now, in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, that the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, that he made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom, and put it also in writing, saying, Thus saith Cyrus, king of Persia, The Lord God of heaven hath given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he hath charged me to build him a house at Jerusalem, which is in Judah. According to the Old Testament accounts, Cyrus seems to believe in the Jewish God. Not only does he seem to believe in the Jewish God, he seems to attribute his success to the Jewish God. Of course, there is no evidence that any Persian emperor believed in any version of the Jewish God, and a ton of written evidence, both from the Greeks and the Persians themselves, that points to the idea that the Persian emperors were indeed Zoroastrian. What exactly does this mean? Why is it that the Jewish writers seem so fond of the Persian Empire? Why is it that the Jewish writers seem to believe that they have been personally favored by the Persian Empire? Why do the Jewish writers seem to imply that Cyrus believed in their God? And lastly, why is it that Ahura Mazda and the Zoroastrian religion was well known even to Persia's enemies, while there is no mention of a Jewish God by the Persians? Why is it that the Jewish texts seem to imply that the Persian religion of Zoroastrianism is the same as their own? It's all circumstantial evidence, of course, but it seems to be a near overwhelming amount of circumstantial evidence. It seems to lead in one particular direction. Yahweh is Ahura Mazda.